Hello and welcome to Canguro English. I'm Christian and this is part 2 of learning phrasal verbs the easy way, with twice the biscuits but only half of the calories. Now, if you haven't watched part 1, then you are going to have no idea what I'm talking about. So don't forget to check out part 1 before you watch this, part 2. If you have already watched part 1, perfect. In this class, I am going to talk about 6 more particles that will help you to understand phrasal verbs the easy way with cognitive linguistics. The first particle we're going to talk about is of. Here on my plate, I have a biscuit. And now I'm going to remove this biscuit. The biscuit is gone. I have lost contact with it. But here, on my plate, some little pieces of the original biscuit remain. You could say that they are pieces of the original biscuit, or you could say that they are the original biscuit. And these represent the meaning of. Now, we could use of in a literal way. Phrasal verbs like smell of. It smells of the original biscuit. Or consists of. It's exactly the same material as the original. Or I could use this in a more abstract way. This reminds me of the original. Now let's switch perspective. Instead of focusing on these little crumbs which I have, let's look at this biscuit which has been taken away from me. If we focus on this helps us to understand phrasal verbs like rob of and deprive of, which talk about things that I don't have anymore. The next particle is round or around. It talks about something moving in a circular motion. This biscuit is moving around. But it can also be used to talk about movement in general. For example, the children ran around the classroom. Also, if something is moving around, it's very difficult to catch it. So another meaning of around is to avoid. And you might hear a politician trying to skate around an issue. Now, around could describe a completely circular motion, or only part of the circle, a curve. And so when I am wrapping something, like this biscuit in this paper, you can see that when the paper forms a curve like this, I can say that I am wrapping the paper around the biscuit. But round could be 2 types of movement. It could be round like this, or it could be round like this. And this gives us the contrasting meaning, the opposite meaning, of something which is not moving. It's in the one place. It's spinning around. And this helps us to understand phrasal verbs like hang around, where you do nothing. Also, when something turns around, it can show us something completely different. Here, on this side, I have chocolate, but when I turn it around, I have only biscuit. And this helps us to understand phrasal verbs where we are persuading people or changing their opinion in the opposite direction, such as to talk around a person. The next particle we're going to talk about is back. Now remember that cognitive linguistics tells us that the human experience directly influences language. Now humans move forward. We walk in this direction. And even when we talk about abstract concepts like time, we relate this to our experience as humans. So to move forward in time is to move into the future. And to move backwards in time is to move into the past. So one meaning of back talks about to go back into the past. For example, here I have a biscuit on my plate. And now I'm going to eat the biscuit. The biscuit is gone. But I really wish I had the biscuit. The only way to get the biscuit is to go back in time. Now I have my biscuit again. The biscuit has returned. It is back. And this helps us to understand phrasal verbs which involve returning things. Like, if you borrow a book from your friend, you will give it back. If I could do this, if I could go back in time, then I could have unlimited biscuits. All I would have to do is repeat and repeat and repeat. So back also talks about when you repeat something. Like if you call somebody and then you call them again, you call them back. Now let's switch perspectives. Imagine that this biscuit is moving forward through time, but I stop it and I start to bring it in this direction. I am stopping the biscuit from making progress. I am holding it back or forcing it back. The next particle is over. Now, over is really interesting because it could be a movement or it could be something static. First, let's look at movement. To understand movement, we need three things: an obstacle, a starting point, and a finishing point. And the object moves from the starting point over the obstacles and to the finishing point. And this helps us to understand basic phrasal verbs like when you go over to your friend's house. You start at your house and you go over some obstacles and you finish at your friend's house. When you move from the starting point over an obstacle to a finishing point, we could say that this action is complete. So phrasal verbs with over also talk about actions which are completed, especially actions with obstacles. Imagine if you break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend and you're really upset and crying. These feelings, these emotions are your obstacle. But then one day you finally overcome these emotions. You complete your feelings for this person and you get over them. You will notice that over talks about this movement. So it also talks about covering something. For example, I can use this paper to cover over the biscuits. Or if it's very, very cold, then maybe a lake in your city will freeze over. The frost and snow and ice will come in and cover the water like this. Also, when the biscuit moves from the starting position to the finishing position, it has changed hands. It has transformed its position. So, phrasal verbs with over can also talk about change and transferring things. So, for example, I can take over your company. Your company was in your hand and now it's in my hand. And also I can put over my idea. The idea started in my mind and I transferred it over to your mind. But remember that over is not only a movement, it's also a static position, when one thing is higher than another thing. And remember that human experience shapes language. Now, if I want to inspect this biscuit, to have a close look at this biscuit, do I hold it up in the air like this? No. Human experience tells us that when we want to examine something, then we hold it down in front of us like this. And then we are over the biscuit. We are higher than the biscuit. And this helps us to understand phrasal verbs with over, which talk about considering or examining something. Like when you think over an idea or you look over a proposal. The next particle is through. Through comes from an Old English word which meant water pipe. So you can visualize through as a type of tube or cylinder. And we define a starting point and a finishing point. And something travels from the starting point through the cylinder and exits. And this helps us to understand basic phrasal verbs like listen through. The sound is entering here and exiting here into my ear. Now imagine if I put the biscuit inside the cylinder and nothing comes out. Then the biscuit is not through. The action didn't complete. But now it is. It's through. So phrasal verbs with through also talk about actions that are complete, 100%, things which are done thoroughly. So when you look through a paper or you think through a problem, you don't think through it 10% or 20%. You think through it all of the way until completion. Now imagine if this cylinder is very, very small and the biscuit is very, very big. It's very difficult to force the biscuit through. It's really struggling and it came out. So phrasal verbs with through also talk about passing through difficulties. So maybe if you're having a depressive episode or you are having problems in your relationship, you need to try to get through this period. Now, when the biscuit enters the tube at this end and exits out the other end, we could say that it has transformed its position. It has been transmitted. And so phrasal verbs with through can also be used to talk about communication. If you try to telephone somebody, but you're having difficulty, you can say, I can't get through. And also, if I want to transmit my idea to you, I can try to get my idea through to you. The final particle is for, and this really shows how human experience affects language. This part of our body is called our forehead. When we want something in life, when we have an objective or a target, we turn our attention towards it. We face it with our forehead. So when you want a job, you apply for the job. If you have an English exam, you study for the exam. And I can also use it to direct my feelings and my emotions towards a recipient. I care for all of my students, especially you guys. So I bought these biscuits for you. Well, I hope that you found this class interesting, and I hope that your confidence with phrasal verbs is really growing through understanding and studying phrasal verbs in this new and exciting way. If you would like to see any more videos about the English language, then don't forget to subscribe. I'm Christian, this is Canguro English. I'll see you in class. You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.